pirate ships had a massive rat problem. But here's the strange part. You're in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by endless oceans, sometimes weeks away from land, and yet almost every ship in history ended up swarming with rats. That shouldn't even be possible, right? And yet it happened, again and again. The truth is, rats weren't just random stowaways. They were expert travelers, and pirates, without realizing it, gave them the perfect vehicle to spread across the globe. The first rats didn't magically appear at sea. They boarded from the docks. Every busy port was a paradise for rodents. Warehouses filled with grain, rotting garbage piled in corners, animal pens dripping with waste, stagnant puddles of water collecting in the streets. To sailors, these were dirty inconveniences. To rats, it was heaven. An all-you-can-eat buffet with free housing included. Black rats in particular became the masters of the seas. They were smaller, more agile than their brown cousins, and capable of squeezing through the tiniest cracks. They could climb ropes like they were ladders, scurry across anchor chains, and slip aboard ships before anyone even noticed. Cargo was often already infested before it touched the deck. Grain sacks carried rat families inside. Flour barrels and hardtack crates weren't just food supplies for sailors. They were pre-furnished apartments for rodents. Every stop made the problem worse. A ship leaving London with just a handful of rats could pick up dozens more in Lisbon, and another wave in the Caribbean. Each port was like a rat recruitment centre, always open, always busy. While pirates believed they were spreading fear across the seas, what they were really spreading, far more effectively, were rats. Once rats made it aboard, the ships themselves turned into floating cities. The very supplies that kept sailors alive became comfortable rat hotels, grey or Hull. In sacks weren't just meals, they were nests. Wool bales turned into soft, warm bedding. Cotton bundles became nurseries for rat families. Coiled ropes created intricate tunnel systems. Even spare sailcloth worked like tents, offering shelter no sailor ever thought to disturb. Wooden barrels, the sailors' main storage method, were supposed to keep food safe. But rats had other plans. They gnawed through wood with ease, chewing holes that ruined entire provisions. And they didn't stop at eating. They urinated and defecated on everything they touched, contaminating far more food than they actually consumed. One rat could ruin months of carefully planned supplies in a matter of days, and reproduction made the problem explode. A single female rat could give birth every 3 weeks, with up to 10 babies in a litter. One stowaway mother could turn into dozens before anyone even realized the infestation had begun. Within a few months, hundreds. The design of ships themselves only helped the rats. Wooden hulls never fit perfectly, and gaps between planks were inevitable. Storms widened the cracks, creating fresh entryways. The bilge, that dark, damp section at the bottom of the ship where water and waste collected, was absolute paradise for rats. Sailors hated it, but rats thrived in it. Hidden beams and spaces beneath the floorboards created rat-sized highways that stretched from bow to stern. Rats could cross the entire ship without ever being seen by the crew. Voyages often lasted months. Supplies were stocked in massive quantities, meaning food and water were always available. Sailors tossed scraps aside carelessly, creating extra meals for their unwanted passengers. Ships stayed warm, sheltered, and perfect for rat reproduction. They weren't just stowaways anymore, they were colonists. Every ship was a rat city floating on the ocean, and these passengers caused more. They damaged than most pirates ever realized. They didn't just steal food. They gnawed through ropes, threatening the rigging during storms. They chewed sailcloth, creating holes that weakened wind power. They damaged wooden beams until planks became unsafe. It was the maritime equivalent of termites eating through a house, except these termites also spread deadly diseases. Rats carried fleas loaded with plague bacteria. They spread typhus. They transmitted leptospirosis. And in the cramped, filthy conditions of a ship, disease spread at terrifying speed. A single outbreak could cripple a crew within days. Sometimes, sailors were stranded weeks away from land, helpless as illness tore through their ranks. The rats had turned ships into floating hospitals without doctors. But the threat wasn't just physical, it was psychological. At night, sailors could hear rats scurrying in the dark, gnawing, squeaking, multiplying. Sleep became restless. Morale crumbled. The feeling that the ship was being eaten alive from the inside left sailors desperate, and they fought back. Cats were the most common weapon. Official crew members often treated as ship officers, but cats could only control the population, never eliminate it. Rats simply learned to avoid cat territory. Traps were another tool, from spring-loaded devices to falling weights built out of ship materials. But rats are intelligent. They learned quickly, teaching their offspring which traps to avoid. It was like playing chess against an opponent that multiplied every few weeks. Some ships experimented with other animals. Dogs were good in open spaces but clumsy in cramped areas. Ferrets could get into tight corners but weren't always reliable. Some crews even tried monkeys, which usually just caused more chaos than they solved. The result was less of a war on rats and more of a floating zoo that still failed to win the battle. Poison seemed logical, but it backfired. Dead rats rotted in unreachable places, filling ships with stench. Worse, poison sometimes killed livestock or even crew members by accident. Desperate, crews even tried smoke treatments burning sulfur to drive rats out, but this carried a terrifying risk of fire. Imagine risking your entire ship just to try to evict a few stowaways. The rats always came back, always. And when ships finally docked at remote islands, the problem spread even further. Rats leapt ashore or were abandoned by accident, colonizing places that had never known rodents before. Birds that had evolved without predators suddenly found their eggs and chicks devoured. Crops like coconuts and sugarcane suffered massive losses. Islands that had been untouched for thousands of years collapsed in a single generation. By the 18th century, black rats had reached every continent except Antarctica. They spread faster than human trade itself, hitching free rides across oceans. Modern genetic studies can still trace today's island rat populations back to ships from the 1600s and 1700s. What started as a handful of rodents in a port city became one of the most successful biological invasions in history. Pirates thought they ruled the seas, but in reality, the true conquerors weren't men with cutlasses and cannons. They were the rats. The smallest stowaways who turned pirate ships into floating cities and left one of the biggest marks on world history.